Okay, so this is going to go over our dimensions and constraints that we talked about today in class. So we're going to start from the very beginning of it. First thing we do is go up to create, and we're going to create a new document. And we're going to call this, if you haven't got it, we're going to call it dimensions and constraints. Now, just to kind of go over how we look at our toolbars across the top, we can see what we've got by hovering or holding over something. We can see the keyboard commands. So revolve is Shift plus W, tells you a little bit about what it does. If I scroll with my center mouse wheel, I zoom in. Scrolling back and forth, I can zoom in. I recommend we use the button on the center mouse button to turn to from free scrolling to the click so that you can feel it. We can rotate our views by clicking and right mouse button and dragging around to see our views. Control and the right mouse button will give us the ability to pan, go left and right, up and down, and holding the right mouse button orbits or rotates around in our place or space. First thing we want to do is we're just going to left click on top so that it gives us our top face down view. And we want to insert a sketch. So we're going to click the sketch button to insert a sketch. It opens up our sketch, but once we insert a sketch, we have to say, where do we want that sketch to go? So we're going to click on this sketch plane, and that's going to create where we're going to start to draw our sketch. Once you've selected sketch and the plane, your drawing tools will open up for you. And this is where we can click on our corner rectangle, click once to select it, click once to start, drag out so that you can see what it is. When I click again, it creates my rectangle. Okay. Now we talked about if I want to change the sides of my rectangle, if I click here, I can drag out or create a second rectangle. The reason I'm creating a second rectangle is I never turn my tool off. So if I hit the escape button, it turns the tool off, and I can click and delete out the rectangle that I had previously deleted out. I want to hit that or go back, and I can go back to delete those out. So we want to make sure that we don't have our tools selected as we're going through so that we can get them. So now I've got my rectangle. If I want to, I can drag and make it larger or bigger. I might accidentally make some changes to it, or maybe I do want to. So we're going to dimension it. So without having anything selected, I'm going to go up, select our dimension tool, or hit D, select my horizontal line, move my mouse up a little bit. If I move left or right, it's just where is the number going to be. So I'm going to put it over here just for fun. I'm going to make it 100, so it's 100 millimeters. So I've got my dimension there. I still have my dimension tool on. I'm going to do the same thing with my vertical line. Click once, slide out, and I'm going to make this by 30 millimeters. So there's my squares 100 by 30 millimeters. So now if I turn this tool off, I can select my square and I can move the square, but I cannot change the square. I can move it left and right. I can move it up and down, but I cannot change the size of the square. We also talked about how we can do those coincidentals, connect those 2 points together so that we create an anchor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here at the top, and I'm going to go up to coincident. And so what we're going to do is we're going to connect them to the same location. So I'm going to make my coincident. I'm going to turn the tool on. I select my first point. It doesn't matter what. I'm going to select the top left corner of my model, and I'm going to select the origin point. It's always a good idea to have some part of your model anchored to the origin point, because that's going to be 0, 0, where everything starts from. So in this case, I did the top corner to the origin point. Could have just as easily done the bottom right corner. It's really your personal preference of what you're looking for. I'm going to turn that anchor off. It's very important that when you're doing this coincidental, I can't bind this corner to the origin point and this corner to the origin point. That's physically impossible. So you'd only pick the one that you could do. We're going to add in a circle. So I'm just going to go in, show you again how I'm going to add a circle. I click once to select the circle tool. Click once to drop the circle in. I start to move my mouse out to make it the size that I'd like it to be. I click to say I've set my circle size. And then just like we did before, we want to dimension it out. So I'm going to hit my dimension tool. select the diameter of my circle, and you can either do, if you have it inside the circle, you can do your dimensioning on the inside of the circle, or I like to drag mine out and do the dimensioning on the outside of the circle, hit enter, and we're gonna make this a 25 millimeter radius circle, and we've got it there. Same thing, I can move this circle around. If I turn this dimensioning tool off, I can grab the circle, I can move the circle around, but I cannot resize the circle unless I click on my dimensions and make it 32 or something else. So then I've made the circle a different size. We also showed you guys how to add those construction lines. So I'm going to go up and I'm going to add a construction line. So I'm going to do two ways. I'm going to show you both ways. I'm going to add one construction line by hitting construction line, then the line tool. Start at the top left corner, drag it all the way down to the bottom right corner of my model, and it's a dotted line to let you know that it's a construction line. I'm going to delete that out and show you the other way to do it. I could select my line first and draw my line. This is the way I like to do it. I'll draw my line out and then get it connected. And then what I do is turn the line tool off. I go back and select just the line. So I select just the line, so the line is highlighted. And then I say, okay, I want this to be construction. So I hit the construction tool to turn it into a construction line. And that would be how we would set up that as our construction line. Oh, I got to select it again. And I'm going to select my construction line and hit the enter key. So there's my construction line. So now I've got my construction line through there. Now with that construction line, we're going to use that as our midpoint. Remember, the construction line does not show up in our model. It shows up as a point of reference for us. So now we're going to take, and I can put my pieces way away from each other. So I'm going to have them separated way far apart, show you how good this is at joining them. So I use this midpoint. What midpoint is it says, hey, I'm going to join two things at the midpoint. So I've got my line here. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to do the midpoint of this line. Oh, select that line, the midpoint, select the line. There it is. Now I've got my line selected with midpoint, the center dot of my circle, and it moves everything right into the circle. Now I'm going to need to redimension this circle because it's a little bigger, or redimension my edges of the model. So either way, I'm going to turn this off and I'm going to make this a little bit wider. So let's make this 45. So there's 45 millimeters, and I've still got it set up to the middle. When we get our sketch how we want it to be, we can hit the green checkbox to say, hey, I've got my sketch exactly as I want it, and it's in a two-dimensional space. Now, if we know we've got our sketch and this is all we need for our part, one of the things that we can do is we can also hide our sketch planes. So I can turn the sketch planes on or off, which will just give me my shape that I've got. So I've got what my model is, so it makes it so it looks nice and clean with what we've got with it. Now, once we've got our shape on here, the last piece of this was to extrude this out. So what we're going to do is I've got my sketch here. I'm going to now go in and I'm going to add an extrusion. So I'm going to hit this extrude button. It creates an extrusion. Make sure that we call it a solid extrusion. So we're going to then just click on our surface where we want it to go. It's automatically going to rise from the floor to the ceiling, indicated by this arrow. But I could just as easily change the direction of the arrow and have it go from the floor down. Now that's not really that important here. Where it does become important is when you have things, you're trying to make things push out to the left or push out to the right. You can get that. The depth, if I rotate around, I can see what the current depth of it is. The current depth is 25 millimeters. I could change that depth and say I only want this to be 15 millimeters deep. So I get a thinner block. So it's going to get us what the block is for my shape. When I'm done with this, I hit the green checkbox and it will create my shape, my extruded shape for us. So now I've got my model. So I've got it set up exactly as I had it for my rectangle. And I can change and look at the sides of it, the top of it. I can zoom out to see all kinds of neat things about my shape. We talked about today in class with the parametric modeling that it keeps like a running tab or list of the things that we've done. If I find, hey, this isn't right, I can go back into my sketch. So I double click to reopen my sketch. I can click on the dimensioning of my line and I can say I only want this to be a 10 millimeter hole. And then when I hit the green checkbox, it will automatically update everything that follows it because we've got everything set up the way it is. So now I've only got a 10 millimeter hole inside my object here. So I can show the dimensions of, I can change up a model by just making a couple of quick clicks to get it. So this would be my extruded model. Now, if I want to change the extrusion, I could go back in, change the depth of it. Say I only want it to be 8 millimeters thick. So I want it to be nice and thin. I'd hit the checkbox. And so now I've got a nice thin, maybe this is a pen or pencil holder, and it's just going to be a plate that I've got sitting on the table. When I'm done with this, it'll save automatically. I just go back to my Onshape. It'll generate a preview for you of what you've got for it, and then it saves everything for you so that you can see where you're at and what you've got here. If it's something that you don't like, we can always delete it to send it to the trash. We can share it with others. That is your design dimensions and constraints first lesson in Onshape.